Hello and welcome to our Facebook Live session, which is about the help students from EU countries that they can receive if they choose to study at Middlesex University. My name is Azize and I'm here with Lucky Kuman from the Student Welfare Advice Team at Middlesex University, and we'll be here for the next half an hour or so to answer any questions that you may have. Please comment on the video below and we'll be happy to answer any questions which you do have. So let's begin, and Lucky will now give you a short introduction to give you an idea about the help that's available to EU students if they choose to study at Middlesex University.
Thank you, Azize. Good evening, everyone. So what I'm going to talk about today is what funding students from EU countries may be able to receive if they come to study at Middlesex University. The reason we're doing this is because EU students are not always aware of what funding they may be entitled to. So very often we see students who come to the study with us, and then maybe in their second year and third year, they come to see us and realise they may have been entitled to some funding. So we thought it would be a good idea to do this short video to let you know what you may be entitled to. Hopefully you'll be able to see this before you arrive, so you come prepared. So if you do have any questions, so please comment below and we'll be able to answer those questions. Okay, thank you very much.
So I've spoken to a few students, and I've heard from a student from Lithuania who says that London is very expensive and she'd like to know if she can get any help with paying for accommodation.
Okay, so you are right, London can be very expensive to live in, and we are a London-based university. Part of the attraction of coming to London is the culture, the social life, but living here can prove to be expensive. So this is why we want to explain to EU students what you may be entitled to if you come to study in England and study at Middlesex University. So there's two ways that EU students can get funding through Student Finance England. Student Finance England is the funding body for students who study in England. The main ways EU students get funding from Student Finance England is for their tuition fees. This is for any EU student who comes to study in England. They will get their tuition fees paid if they've lived in the EU country for the last 3 years. So that's the very simple way of getting your tuition fees paid, and then you would have to then pay for your living costs on top of that. So your living costs would be your rent, your travel, going out, your food, your bills. There is a way to get help with your living costs, and that's what we call a migrant worker application. So it's slightly technical, but I'll explain it to you as best as I can so you know the basics. And there's three main criteria that a migrant worker student has to meet. One, they have had to have lived in an EU country for the last 3 years. So that's any EU country for the 3 years up until the 1st of September 2018. Okay, so if you've lived from the 1st of September 2015 to the 1st of September 2018 in any EU country, you meet that first criteria. Second criteria is that you are in England on the 1st of September 2018. So you have to be physically present, and you can prove that you're physically present in the country on the 1st of September 2018. And ways to prove that normally are you've set up a bank account, or you've got a national insurance number in the UK, and so you can provide a documentary evidence that you're in the country on the 1st of September. The final condition is that you're working, you're a migrant worker, and that means that you are working sufficient hours in order to be classed as a worker. So basically that means you're working at least 16 to 20 hours per week whilst you're a student. If you meet that criteria and you continue working for duration of your studies, you will continue to receive not only your wages from working, but you will also receive the maintenance loan, which will help you pay your rent and your living costs. Okay, so that's very basic information about what you may be entitled to as an EU student who comes to live and work in London. Okay.
Okay, so is it true that landlords can refuse you if you're from the EU?
Okay. No, basically no. So I think this question arises when some students come to the UK and are asked for their passports. So what landlords now have to provide is proof that they've looked at the immigration status of a student that they've given a property to. It's not just students, it's all landlords for all properties. So they have to check what your immigration status is. And the way of doing that is by checking your passport. So when they're asking for your passport, they shouldn't be checking your nationality. They should be just checking to see whether you're legally in the UK. And passport, national ID card, visa documents are the way they have to do it. It's actually illegal to refuse on the basis of nationality. So if they check your passport and say, actually, you're from this country, I don't want anyone in my flat living who's from this country, then, and actually what they're doing is illegal, and you can report that to the police, or you can come to the university, we'll help you report it. But they will ask for your national ID card or your passport, because they have a legal duty to check it, that you're here legally. Okay?
Okay, so if you don't like the flat, so say if a student doesn't like the flat, can they just move out?
On the whole, no. So again, in the UK, if you come to London, you will try to move into private rented accommodation at some stage during your studies. So private rented accommodation is not with the university, but living in a house or a flat, sometimes with other students, sometimes on your own, but you have a landlord who rents the flat to you. Mm-hmm. You can't normally just move out. You normally signed up for a fixed period of time, and that fixed period is anything from 6 months to 12 months or longer. The minimum period is normally 6 months. So there's a tenancy agreement that you have with your landlord, and the tenancy is basically a contract that you have with the landlord that tells you your terms and conditions, what you're entitled to, what your responsibilities are, how much rent you have to pay, when you have to pay the rent, and that contract you have to sign saying you agree to all this. So that contract is normally what we call an assured short-hold tenancy, and the minimum length is 6 months. So if you choose to move out before that 6 month period is finished, then technically you're still liable for the rent. You still have to pay the rent for the whole 6 months, even if you move out early. So what we advise students to do is either bring it to us and we'll check the tenancy agreement for you, or be aware if you're signing something and it says it's a 6 months agreement. Typically most student agreements are 12 months to cover the academic year in the summer. So if it's a 12-month agreement, you have to pay the rent for the 12 months, even if you move out. So it's very important that you're aware of that at the beginning before you sign anything. Mm-hmm.
Okay. If you've just tuned in, we're discussing the help that's available for EU students who want to study at Middlesex, and we'll go on to our next question, which is how do you it's actually more of a statement. So if you're a student and you can't afford to live in London because it's so expensive, how do you make up for that? Why is it so expensive?
Like Azize says, and the question is asking, London can be very expensive. So what we advise students is, before you arrive in the UK, have a look at the cost of rent, cost of travel, the cost of basic amenities, utilities and bills, and if you can, using that information, work out some kind of budget. So if you know you're going to be working here and you have an idea of what your wage will be, that's one part of your income, and the other part may be, like we discussed at the beginning, it may be you're entitled to a maintenance loan as a migrant worker student from an EU country. So again, maintenance loan is a fixed amount, so you can put that down as your income, have a rough idea of what your outgoings will be, your rent, your travel costs, educational costs, bills, and then work out how much you need to live on. So we say this to all students, whether they're UK based or whether they're from the EU. Mm-hmm. It's just a very simple way of looking at what you can afford.
So it's just planning beforehand?
Absolutely, just plan beforehand, mm-hmm. Have a good idea of what your income will be, what your outgoings will be, and then that will help you manage your time in London. Because obviously London can be expensive in travelling, it can be expensive in accommodation. Ways to control your spending is to maybe share, rather than having a flat on your own, which is more expensive, than sharing with other students. Another way of keeping your bills down is working whilst you're here. So a lot of our students work regardless of whether they're EU students or migrant worker students, because that extra income will ensure that London becomes more affordable to you. Okay.
Okay. So, if a student doesn't have any money and they until they find a job, they don't have any money, will the university be able to help them in that sense? Will they have the help there for them?
The university does help students in hardship, but only in certain circumstances. So it's important to, if you're coming from an EU country and you arrive here, it's important to have some money behind you, to have some money, some savings before you arrive in the UK. If you arrive with no money, then you are going to have a problem, because if you're not entitled to the maintenance loan, you're going to have to find a job, and then you're going to have to wait a month for your wages, typically. So that first month you may not have any money. If you arrive and you haven't got anywhere to live, you're going to have to find somewhere private rented. Then you will have to find a month's rent in advance and a month's rent as deposit. So if you have no money at the beginning, that's going to be very difficult. So what we suggest you do, going back to that previous question, was just have some kind of savings, some kind of plan of what you're going to do when you arrive here, and that will then set you up for that first month. There is a hardship fund, but that's only available later in the academic year. So when you arrive, you need to have your own money in order to maybe find accommodation, to get through until you start working, and get through until your maintenance loan arrives. So again, like I said earlier,
need something to fall back on.
You need to plan beforehand and have some money to back you up when you arrive.
Okay.
Okay.
Make sure you've got that, guys. I've got another issue. So if they have to pay money, will they have to pay money before they move in? Basically, do they have to pay money?
Yes. So on the whole, students who move into private rented accommodation have to pay rents in advance, normally a month's rent in advance, and they pay a renter's deposit. So that's 2 months of rent that you need in your pocket before you're able to move into any place. If you're going to horse accommodation, then obviously the rent is cheaper. The deposit is less. It's £250 at the moment, but you then have to pay your first instalment of your rental accommodation in halls, so you need that lump sum available to you as well. The cheapest form of accommodation, I would say, in London is what we call licensees, being a lodger, moving in with a landlord, moving in with someone who lives in the property with you, shares the facilities with you, the bathroom, the kitchen, etc. But you have your own room, but you share those facilities. That is normally the cheapest way of finding property in London. And also, those type of landlords don't ask for deposits, or they ask for less deposit. So if you don't have much money up front for a deposit, then you may want to look at lodgings with a landlord as a way of making it affordable. Okay, and ways to find that is through our accommodation page. So it's accommodation at mdx.ac.uk, and within that, if you look at private rented accommodation, that'll give you lots of information and lots of links to listings sites where you can find landlords advertising their properties.
Okay. So, which brings me on to the next question. So, do landlords live in the same property as the student?
No, apart from if you're a lodger. So if you're a lodger, you're lodging with the landlord. But typically, landlords live outside of the property and they rent out the whole property to the student, whether it's a flat or a shared house. Landlords are only able to access the student's property in certain circumstances, and only if they give 24 hours notice. So it's important, they can't just turn up. They can't just say, this is my property, I want to come in and have a look at the property, I'm doing a spot check. They have to give notice. They have to give 24 hours notice before they turn up, and then they are able to come into the property and have a look round. So very often agencies or landlords, they do quarterly checks. Every 3 months they say, we're going to come on this date because we want to check the property. We want to check it's in a good state, and you keeping it in a good state, and there's no damage done, and there's no repairs that need doing or anything like that. So that's fair enough, because it's in your contract, and they've said every 3 months, and so they've given you notice at the beginning of the tenancy that every 3 months
So it's been specified beforehand?
Absolutely.
Okay.
But we do get some landlords who think they can just turn up, and they're not allowed to do that. So again, if you get that type of situation with landlords, then come and see us at welfare, and then we can advise you further on what you can do. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lucky, for giving us this helpful information, and thank you all for tuning in today. I hope it's been very helpful. As I've said before, well, I'm going to say again, if you do have any further questions, please do contact welfare@mdx.ac.uk, like if you have any questions, and they're there at all times. But thank you.
Thank you.